The next panel up is a very interesting one. It talks about elephants and dancing with them, whatever that might be. Actually, big companies and small companies. The moderator is Fadi. He has a company in Estonia, and he is an A resident. So Fadi, please come on the stage and introduce your panel.
Thank you, and good morning. It's great to be here. Yeah, my third year at Latitude, and it's super awesome to see every year. This conference is getting greater, and it's been always a great experience. So, yeah, my name is Fadi Bishara. I'm originally from Syria. I live in Silicon Valley. I work with entrepreneurs from outside of Silicon Valley and help connect them to resources and help them go global. We're having a panel today to discuss how do startups could interface and work with large corporations for distribution, for partnerships. A lot of the things that's happening now in the trends is more of these seamless experiences that's going to require having many companies and many entities to collaborate and cooperate and do partnerships. And it's often a challenge to have startups who have different opinions, different experience, and different value systems versus the executives and the big companies. They also have different priorities. They're experienced in more issues of diversity and complexity and scale. And how could we find the common language to bring them together? So I'd like to invite the panelists to join us. And so, great. So we have short time, about 20 minutes. We'll be kind of brief and brisk and try to get as much value as possible. So why don't we start just introducing yourselves and just your name, your role, what company you're with, and if you have any experience, how do you interface with startup? If you are a corporate and if you're an entrepreneur, what's your experience working with big companies?
Hi, so I represent a startup. My name is Martin Rand. I'm the co-founder of Vitalfields. We do farm management software for farmers. And we have this European compliance angle to it, so we automate compliance reporting. And the data collected is used to advise farmers to get even more efficient. So this is what we do. We are a mass market product, so we work with small and medium farms, but we have some of the largest farm operators in Europe as our customers. And also Monsanto Growth Ventures did their first overseas investment in Vitalfields, and obviously Monsanto is a very big company.
Very good.
I'm Rocco van den Berg. I'm representing Philips, one of the major health tech companies in the world. And I'm an innovation lead at the Digital Accelerator. And what we do, we are a center of excellence, internal to really accelerate internal groups across Philips by developing new-to-the-world propositions. And in doing that, we are very strongly liaising with startups.
Great.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Lanz with Google. I guess I'm one of the elephants in the room. So I head up strategy and operations for the EMEA region for Google out of London. And prior to that, I spent about 8 years running the apps business at Google, working with some of the most innovative app developers out there. Also very involved in something called Google for Entrepreneurs here in the EMEA region. And I'll be talking a little bit later about something called the Campus Initiative, which is our sort of virtual office space that we have around the world that helps startups work together, share ideas, and ultimately meet with large companies as well.
Great.
Morning, I'm Michael Jackson from Mangrove Capital. I'm neither an elephant or a startup in this world, but we see all our portfolio companies struggling to work with large companies, even going so far as to invest recently in a platform that allows this to happen, which we can maybe talk about a little bit later.
Very interesting.
Hello, I'm Rannu. I'm an entrepreneur, founder of Fortumo. There are about 5 billion mobile users in the world and only about 1.5 billion credit cards. So our company helps people without credit card to pay online for digital goods and services in about 95 countries. And in doing that, we work with some of the biggest elephants in the room. Then we work with all the mobile operators and big carrier groups from the one side, and big Silicon Valley companies and US companies, Google, Microsoft, and others on the other side. So we are a very small company between very big companies.
I'm Mikko Välimäki from Tuxera, based in Helsinki. I'm not a very good dancer, but we have been able to build our company from 0 to 10 million revenues and counting. We sell our software mainly to device manufacturers in consumer electronic industry. Top guys in Asia like Samsung, LG, Sony is using our software. We have the German car manufacturers, Volkswagen Group, BMWs, Daimlers, and top tech companies in United States as key partners and customers as well. So we have done something right and hopefully able to share our experience here as well.
All right, excellent. So we have a great mix here. We have some entrepreneurs who are, have the experience of working with big companies and fundraising and doing partnerships, and we have some big companies who work with entrepreneurs and specialties. With Rocco, maybe we start with you a little bit about what is your experience working directly with the startups, and how does Philips do it in a way that has been effective?
Well, first of all, I love to work with startups. That's clear, because I love the energy they bring, the focus that they bring, and also their, well, more or less their, unlimited belief in their solution. That's really like, it provides a lot of energy. However, you know, if that energy comes in and it's like not really utilized in a good way, then it can also be frustrating. You know, me representing a corporate can sometimes be frustrating because maybe our our machines are a little bit slower, maybe of startups. You know, it can be very hard for startups to find the right entry into a company. That can be very frustrating. So what we do as part of the digital accelerator, that we are, you know, more and more becoming this liaison, because I think if you have someone that could really work for you and has a KPI actually to make you successful as a startup, I think that may work. And then we can do the work. You know, we can go to all the 100 countries that we have and all the, you know, gazillions of business units and make the right introduction and work with you. I think that's, yeah.
Great. Michael, just you mentioned with Google for Entrepreneurs and Google Campuses. I mean, tell us a little bit about how is that's a strategy from Google's side, you know, looking to work with startups by creating a space.
Yeah, absolutely. So Google very much believes in growing the overall ecosystem, which includes obviously large companies, but also the whole startup world in the world. And we have something called the Campus Initiative. You should definitely get involved if you're interested. We have offices around the world, and it's essentially a workspace where you can come to a really cool office, actually, that has its own barista, great office space, conference rooms, et cetera, and really work with your startup team, work with other startups, and also meet with other large companies and other partners to really do great stuff together. And it's something that we've launched in a big way, especially in the European region. And again, I would encourage you to get involved if you're interested.
So maybe we jump to Mikko. So growing to 10 million in revenues, is that what he said, or 100 million, or on the way?
We are making over 10 million this year in revenues.
On the way, you're becoming an elephant soon. So tell us, how is that, you know, interfacing with, you know, with your big customers, and how is that challenge, was it to navigate to access and do these kind of partnerships?
Right, so basically we only sell to these, you know, big companies in the industry, and how it started out, we actually partnered with one of the giants in the industry, Microsoft, and we are selling software which is based on some Microsoft standards. Originally, that's where we started from. On non-Windows platform. So we got from Microsoft some background IP to sell, especially their file systems on Linux and Android, which picked up pretty quickly, 2009, 2010. That was our access to the market. So we basically went close to one big company. We were able to get the kind of credibility coming out of nowhere to sell to other big companies. That's how it basically started for us.
So if we just bring it a little bit more on very early attempt, you know, just making this connection, making this interface, maybe, right, you talk a little bit about, you know, who do you go to, who is that first person you start the conversation with, how do you go about finding these kind of connections and delivering your message?
Yeah, we have found that in big companies, probably the longest part of the sale is actually finding the right person that is a decision maker. And especially for us, and these times of days, decision makers can be anywhere. So for instance, even when we talk about Google or Microsoft, decision maker can be in US, but it can as well be in India or Singapore or London or somewhere in Europe, and it's very hard to find the right person in those companies. That's the first thing. And then once you have identified the right people, obviously you have to use all kinds of startup aggressive things to gain their attention. So you have to do a lot of cold emails, approaches, ask for referrals, approach them at events. You have to navigate and find, you have to distinguish who in the organization is really the decision maker and who is actually your champion and who is actually a gatekeeper. And sometimes it's hard to make a difference between your champion and the gatekeeper, because you find this really friendly person in a big company and you have many, many meetings with him and you feel really good and you see that things are progressing. But after maybe a third or fourth meeting, you find out that actually this person really doesn't want you to access the real decision makers, and he's more like a gatekeeper. So there's a lot of those navigation things that you have to do with some big companies. But in the end, it can all pay off.
Great. Do you, Martin, want to share a little bit about also, Monsanto, the largest company in the world, so how was it easy to find the decision makers versus the gatekeepers and getting to the right people?
So Monsanto Growth Ventures is an investor.
But you also offer product to them as well, right? And then they become investors, or no?
No,
Okay.
Not actually. But the benefit there is that it doesn't take any effort to find smart people in the company. So they have a smart person in almost every area on their payroll, and it can be an immense value to get that knowledge for a small company, which we could never get to this quickly without this partnership.
So, Michael, you said you've invested in a platform, a startup that is exactly to solve this kind of problem. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, I would say, I guess this panel is about, startups.
We have two Michaels, but that's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
So this panel is all about startups working with big companies. Some big companies are not resourced to work with other entities, whether it be startups or other partners. Companies like Google very much are. As I mentioned, the Google for Entrepreneurs program is something that is very well staffed, whether you're in Silicon Valley or in EMEA or Asia Pacific or what have you. Again, one of the goals of this program is to get people to, into sort of the Google ecosystem in an easy way by giving access to these facilities called Google Campus that can help you kind of collaborate, share ideas, and that sort of thing. I will say that our position is sort of a neutral position. We, sponsor these facilities, and you can then work within those. But it's a great way to, I hope, ensure that you're connecting with the right people at Google so that you aren't playing the game of telephone tag all the time.
So, Michael, the startup that's solving this is please.
Yes, sure. One of the biggest difficulties you might have is actually to get from the meeting room into some form of technical integration or something like that. And a lot of big companies or people in big companies, they receive a lot of startups through the door with lots of great ideas. One of the things they need to do is to curate these and find out which ones are going to work for them. So I've invested recently in a platform where people can list their tasks in the big company, or they can put data onto the platform. They can put a data set, for example. Insurance company can put a big data set on the platform, and you as a startup can go for the data. You sign up, and you can go for the data and see what you can discover out of it and come back to it. In advertising, a large company called Ogilvy run an innovation platform exactly the same way. So this ability to work at the edge of the enterprise is, I think, very important, because you're not meeting any decision makers at that point. And if you can get into these things, it's a great start.
So it sounds like the approach here is more from a technical innovation value proposition, and often it's also the business cases here. any of you would like to elaborate about entering into the corporate as an entrepreneur, proposing a value proposition for their business to increase their sales versus a technical solution that, or something that to make their product more efficient? Go ahead, Martin.
There's of course an immense value for a startup in big companies with having large sales networks. So we've interfaced in some of our countries with the largest resellers that started to resell our product. So there's and of course that's a clear value proposition for the company also. But it also brings a huge problem for the small companies that are more focused on the mass market and on the end customer, since the brands get kind of mixed up. So we were actually discovering, we had this very large reseller, and we actually ended that contract because we were discovering we couldn't sign up very big customers anymore, since they didn't understand that we were actually a separate company from that company that was reselling us. And that was that became a counterproductive cycle. So I think this is one of the dangers of working with the big companies.
So this is very interesting point that here about like making the salespeople of the big company the success, helping them sell more product by giving them other products that they sell to their existing base of customers. But could also backfires to the startups because it puts you under the umbrella of the startup. Yep. Has there been any other learning or challenges from that end?
Right, I could add one thing here. So my experience working with big companies is that in our case, they really look for the best technology in the world for something particular, and we seem to have it. Obviously, we have been able to sell it through. Then the kind of challenge here is that if the big customer you have only thinks you are expert in that particular field, then you get sort of stuck there. While at least in our case, we want to develop our product further, basically broaden our offering. That it really needs some work with the guys, a lot of meetings to really find other guys in the customer organization to buy more from you. The upsell is always a challenge, and you have to think basically further than the product you have on day one.
Mm-hmm. Do you have something to add there, right?
Yeah, I mean, big reasons why startups work with big companies is it gives you instant credibility to have that deal. But also one of the flip sides of it is that, that's great, but if you allow one big company to be a really significant part of your business, then that becomes a threat because of the counterparty risk becomes like really, really big. So the best way to really is to work with many different companies of all kinds of sizes, so none of them becomes really big. Mm-hmm. On a practical side, we have found that with startups it's very easy and quick to do deals, but with big companies obviously it takes a lot of time. So even in many cases you can make a deal in, you can agree on all the content of the deal in 1 month or 2 months, but then the legal contract would take another year. And in a couple of cases the practical business rationale of that deal disappears by that time when the legal contract is signed, and none of them benefits. So there are many pitfalls like this.
Rocco, do you want to share something about your approach looking at it from the innovation technology, from the business, from both? What's the value for Philips to be looking at entrepreneurs and startups?
First of all, maybe to comment on you two, that like the risk of having this big company that limits you. In my experience, the startups that we see, it's a luxurious problem if you have a big company as a launching customer. So I understand that you want to diversify and don't want to be too reliant on one company, but most cases that is not a luxury you have as a startup in the beginning. So I would, always also in the contract negotiations, I think, see your first big company as a real good entry into the market, but make sure indeed that you have the flexibility to do other things afterwards. So what the value for us is, of course, as I said earlier, they bring in energy, they bring in new ways. But also, in big companies, there's often maybe a little bit smaller appetite for things that are a little bit uncertain. things that are disruptive. That's not in the most companies not the first initiative to start something that will kill your own business. Or something that no one believes in, and of course, good working with the startups, for example, with very limited investments, you can just have a little bit of a distant look. With a small investment, you're at least on the table and you can follow it. And then if the startup, shows traction, which will never have been done by anyone inside the company, then suddenly it could be, part of your roadmap, and you could, work together with that startup. So they're really, because of their energy, because of their focus, and their ability to quickly develop and pivot. It's a very good, I would say, like a front post for companies such as us.
Very interesting. Like you, as an investor, this is often you do this. You help the startups also connect with the large companies. Where do you see the value proposition that you stitch the two together with?
Well, where it's not happening is where so many big companies now have decided to start innovation department or accelerator or all of these things. Everybody's rushing after this now. Most of them are probably set up by a company with billions of dollars in turnover, and they can spend $2 or $3 million to look cool to the shareholders and relatively useless. I find a lot of people in that area where they're just playing around, and you need to recognize in the innovation departments of these accelerators exactly what you're going to get out of it, and not be wooed by the name of the accelerator. I'm working with a financial company in Bitcoin. We went to 4 different London-based accelerators to get banking accelerators, bank organizations, and they were all talking about all these fancy things, and we said, we want bank account, normal bank account for company, not for Bitcoin, not for nothing. Bank account, no. Innovation, sure, we can help you with everything, but their core product they can't do. And there's a lot of hype around that now in the space. I think you have to be very, very careful where you're going in.
I wanted to comment on that, the risk averseness of big companies as compared to startups. Yes, absolutely, startups are way more risk-taking, and they can do like really different stuff than big companies do. But when making the deal with a big company, then what we've seen happening quite a bit of times is that the big company actually also wants to put the lawyers want to put all the risk on a startup. So if a project fails, then all blame and identification and all the things would be by the startup. And in many cases that can, potentially kill a startup. So it is, but it's a practical way, and it's very understandable from the big business perspective also, because they don't want to risk what they have built over many, many years.
Great.
Maybe I can comment on that, because that is true. If you look at the basic, let's say, legal departments of big companies, they are trained to be risk averse. That's their job. But so I really would recommend at least to have someone like this, again, like someone, your liaison, someone that's your champion in the company that has a vision and that really has the power as well to, to go against the legal department, or find someone, that is also, really part of an innovation team. Because if not, and I agree, like big companies still have to learn, that to share risk and working in, as you said, in ecosystems. I think more and more companies are becoming well aware that it's not just, that the big companies have the value and you little startups, you may be happy to play with us. No, but I think the mentality is changing. That really everyone sees. We all need each other. And that should be, converted into more risk sharing, I think.
So on this notion, Michael, I hear often sometimes from entrepreneurs, they say that, I have this product, but I think it'd be great for Google to integrate with Gmail, with something, but should I share with them, or would Google take it, build it themselves? Do you want to elaborate something about this sometimes the fear or the concern entrepreneurs would think?
Sure. So I think it was said this morning in the opening talk that, as a business, you can really choose to think about your own products, or maybe your team, or your customers. The biggest thing that we focus on at Google, as is true with many other companies, is we focus on the user above all else. So whether you think about Android or Maps or YouTube, it's really all about users. So if you can come to a company like Google and really anchor on the fact that your startup can really augment the life of a user that's currently using one of our products, that could probably lead to a really interesting conversation. Again, anchoring on the value that we, Google, and you together can bring to the actual users of the products.
It's interesting. I mean, a good distinction you're making here between the user and the customer, and that's two different entities at Google. And you're seeing the users as the priority versus the customer being the corporate.
Yes, first and foremost, it's all about users. We do a lot of measurement of how users are using the products. The most popular or most useful button on any Google product is the feedback button, and we thrive on that to make our products better. If it weren't for users, we'd be nothing as a company. So it's the most important thing for us.
So we're going to open it up in a couple of minutes, and maybe if you have a question, we'll take it from the audience. But just one thought about when should the startups not approach the big company, and when should the big company stay away from the entrepreneurs?
I'm going to start by saying when you have less than 1 year's money in the bank. If you don't have, it's going to take 1 year to get a deal through before revenue starts to flow out, meaningful revenue starts to flow from a large company.
You mean it's more waste of time to do business with a big company than to fundraise?
Yeah, you might say that. It takes longer time. It's horrible. But don't go near it until you've got the money and the resources to do it. Otherwise, you'll just be drained into nowhere.
Yeah, I fully agree with this. And another point when you shouldn't approach a big company is that when you think you have something that would be really, really, really strategic for that big company as well. Because if it's really important for that big company, then they would want to develop and own it on their own. And they might just want to talk to you to gain your insights. So if you have like something like this, then you should be really careful who you approach and how you approach it.
Mikko, do you have something?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that one. So in our case, for example, sometimes we see a big customer as our potential competitor. And we have to really think like a lot of the things on the market and how it plays out, who are our competitors. If this big customer already works with our competitor, maybe there's some reason we don't want to work with them. So you have to analyze the whole kind of market and know how the dynamics work there.
Mm-hmm. Martin, I mean, getting investments from large corporate is also like a third conversation by itself. But
I think a young company should approach a big corporation. If they're not selling to big corporations as per se, they should approach them when they have enough customers on their own. Because otherwise, the company, big companies can be very influential, and like Ryan said here, the entrepreneur can simply become dependent on the big company, and if you don't have enough backbone with existing customers, that can really ruin a company sometimes.
Let me add here one more thing in our case. Sometimes we have decided not to approach some really big company or even decided not to deal with them when we make a decision in our small company in Helsinki that these really big companies going down. In a few years, we think they bankrupt. So let's not work with them because we will put a lot of resources, spend a lot of time working with them, giving them deliveries and working with their R&D, and we know they will bankrupt. You can figure out example, for example, in Finland, a very, very big tech company. We actually signed early days and then decided at some point we actually are not going to deliver this project to the end early on. Yeah.
I think it's a good point. We've made the opposite mistake. We approached one company, we chased them for 2 years. They didn't want to work with us, and then suddenly they approached us and said, okay, let's do this project. So we spent 3 months doing something very custom and specific to them, and we launched it. And then only 2 months later, we heard that that whole division was closed down, that product was closed down, and the company didn't do well afterwards. So that's a very good thing.
Yeah, that's a great point here. That this could be a great distraction for the entrepreneurs and the startups to take on one big project and derail. Did you have?
I agree with most of the points. If you want speed, you want something quickly done. Quick money, don't go. But also, I like to say a little bit. If you come in as a startup, and you don't want to share stuff. You need NDAs. That's not a good starting point. I would always say don't be too afraid, because as I said, startups are so quick. You can do so much more. You can show traction with customers so much faster than we can. If you're really afraid that we will pick your idea from that 10-minute discussion and bring it earlier to the market, that's a mistake. I would always be open and discuss because I think that grows the whole area. And also maybe a good, I don't think you should approach a company if you don't have if you have very well thought about your proposition to that company. So what is the value you add, not to your end customers, but also to work with that company? Because your champion needs to defend you. He needs to find the people. He needs a good story. So you need to get a good story for him.
Great. So any questions from the audience here? All right, we have Bill in the front.
Super, thank you very much. I want to take up this question of entrepreneur paranoia. And because a lot of entrepreneurs are paranoid about, big companies stealing their ideas. And, I've heard this for years and years, but I don't think I've ever heard of a case of an entrepreneur who approached a company and subsequently got their product stolen, since there's a famous story of the entrepreneur who invented the intermittent windshield wiper in the 30s, or I don't know. but in high tech, Google stole pay-per-click, but that's not because they approached them, right? But is there a case? Why
Yes,
should
there are.
entrepreneurs be nervous?
I have several. We sell to Asian tech companies, and I have customers or former customers in China, in Korea, some of the really biggest tech companies who have stolen our product. They just ship. They don't pay.
Did they steal it because you walked in and you told them the secrets, or did they just steal it?
They got an evaluation version or something on our software. They take it. Then we see from a product that ships that actually our software is inside. Taiwan has happened. Many cases.
Where you walked in, you approached them, and they took it.
Yeah.
All
Very
right.
easy.
We have another question in the other side.
Can I maybe comment on this? Because I fully agree with you. I speak to many startups. They come to us and they say, well, I have this unique idea. And then the next day I hear exactly the same unique idea from another startup. There's so many startups working on the same. We have been working on years for stuff, and everyone thinks, you see next year you're working on that stuff because you talked to us. No, we already did. So I fully agree. Just open up.
I also agree, both of you. It doesn't happen that, you go in with your idea and then they would steal it. But what often does happen is that you do a strategic project together, you work half a year, 1 year and a half, you invest a lot of your resources into it, and then you get caught up into that company's overall strategy, and at some point you might get then shuffled aside or replaced, or, and you have wasted a lot of time because of focusing and relying too much on that one particular partnership. So this is a more typical story that we've seen more times.
We have a question here.
Good morning. Lynn Bell is my name, and I think I'm the only Anguillian here. If there are others, please raise your hand, but I don't think so. We're a little country of 15,000 people, about 32 square miles. And the comment I'd like to throw out to all of you, including the panel, is that probably the best example of this idea of dancing with elephants is our hosts here today with Estonia, which is obviously a very small country, dancing with giant companies around the world. And I'd like to throw out the proposition that instead of just thinking of entrepreneurs, think about small nations, that you can be a nation builder and help us grow to the scale and size that Estonia has. So come on out to Anguilla, bring your ideas, and help us along. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you for the comment. I think this would be probably get set before our last point. If we to make the best advice from an entrepreneur or a corporate or an investor, what is the highest advice, the key point that you would advise earlier entrepreneurs who are looking at corporate to partner with or big companies to work with?
I think have a clear plan before you approach the company, because really working with big companies can take a huge amount of time, and also have sort of an exit plan. So when do you draw the line? No more, I will spend our time and money on this particular partnership.
Very good point.
So have a plan.
Good. Yeah, and for me, as I said, I think make sure you have a good story for, not only about your own startup, but also about the value for the company. Find a champion and be sure that this champion has a KPI to make you successful. If that's not the case, stop wasting time, I would almost say.
Yeah, I would say just avoid tunnel vision. You know, leave your office, stay involved in your local community, meet with other startups, meet with big companies. It all takes diversity of thought to do big things.
Great.
Recognize the time it's going to take, and you're not going to get any money for a very long time.
Yeah, I would say making a great, amazing product that many big companies, small companies, medium-sized companies would want to use, and you'll be successful.
Patient and focus on the customer.
All right, great insights, great points, and thank you very much for very, very great conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.